I hate that word, but the question around.
You know what? It gets used a lot. You know, if you use it more than in one press conference, then you don't have a very good vocabulary or thesaurus. You really don't.
I'll make sure that's the theme, if you will, around
Okay.
the league was, can Miles pull this together? Can this happen in Miami 4 years ago? Now, there's obviously some very restricted things in the CBA
Yeah.
that may or may not have been put in to make sure that something like 4 years ago doesn't happen again. Forget the loss for a second. How much does the challenge of what's ahead of you these next 2-3 weeks inspire you right now, in the sense that everybody's watching to see if you can do it again?
We're prepared. Mickey, Nick, Andy, Chet, Pat, everybody involved in personnel, Adam Simon, we're prepared. We've got the main thing book all written up, and it's dependent on whatever the scenario we're presented with on July the 1st. And we've got a lot of room for flexibility. There's a tremendous amount of flexibility depending on what happens. And so we're ready. Now, do I feel any pressure? No, I don't. I don't feel any pressure at all. I'm going to do the best job that I can do, and we will all do the best job we can do. I don't think we have to recruit, Chris and LeBron and Dwayne again. 4 trips to the finals and a great organization and 2 world championships. I mean, I'm not dropping championship rings on the table for those guys. They can drop their own, and look at them and wear them with pride. So, yes, we'll have good, conversations with them about what we think we have to do to improve because we value their input. But, on July the 1st, we'll know what we have to do.
If Chris and Dwayne and LeBron all come back in their current salaries, $20 million range, or opt out and come back at that number, does that give you enough flexibility if they don't take a pay reduction to do what you want to do? And do you have permission from Mickey to use?
I don't want to do the hypothetical. You see, that's a real hypothetical because that takes you down a road of ifs. We know what the triggers and mechanisms are if that were to happen. Okay, so, to answer your question about, Mickey, would Mickey do? He will do anything to get those guys to come back. There's been a perception out there that I think has been misconstrued in some way about him not wanting to pay the tax. That's BS, okay? He's been paying the tax for 3 years. He's never asking anybody to take any pay cuts to avoid the tax. That's not who he is. That's a voluntary thing on the part of a player. If that player wants to do something because he wants to give us flexibility to get a better player, then fine, that's voluntary. We're not asking them to do that. They didn't do that in 2010. In 2010, we had a roster of Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade and LeBron James making the max, and Mario Chalmers and Joel Anthony. That's what we started with. That was 5 guys. And then they said, we'd like to get Mike Miller. They said that. I said, okay, this is what it's going to take. We had to trade Bees. And then he said, well, we want Udonis. Well, this is what it's going to take. And they said, fine. So they stepped up to the plate themselves. And I can tell you, without a doubt, and it upsets me, that Mickey's been a taxpayer for the last 3 years, ever since 4 years since this team has been together, and that's not what he's asking players to do. That's a voluntary thing, and so I'm sure that Mickey will do whatever he has to do to keep this team together.
So is it your view that players, if they want to win, there's a perception out there that these guys want to win, that it's their responsibility to do that. Do you differ with that?
No, it's not their responsibility. Their responsibility is to take the best deal they can take for themselves and their family and their career from a monetary standpoint. The CBA and how it's changed things, the mechanism and the conduit for getting better if you have, $62 million and 3 players, and if they know anything about the mechanism, then that's their choice. Otherwise, we still have a lot of other flexibility. We got a taxpayer mid-level exception. We got a trade exception. We got 2 trade exceptions. We got a first-round pick. We got a 55th pick. Okay, we can sign all of our players back, or the ones that we choose to, back to room. So we can bring a lot of great players back here, and we can also go out and get players to come here that we have shown we have in the past, and Shane Battier and Ray Allen and Rashard Lewis, et cetera, and Chris Anderson and those kinds of guys. We have a young talent, two young talents that we like, and James Ennis and Justin Hamilton. You know, we'll see in a year. I think the team needs to be layered a little bit with some young guys, and I think that's one of our objectives next year. And so I hope that throughout this summer, you know, after a year in Europe and Puerto Rico or in Australia, James Ennis has had an extraordinary, you know, season away from us, and so we have high hopes on that. So there's a lot of flexibility regardless of what they do from that standpoint. It could actually be a full mid-level if, but we have to be sort of under a hard cap if we go that way.
Pat, is that a change of thought only because last year at this time, roughly, you were up there extolling the virtues of Mike Miller, how he was essential to your team, he was ambitious. This January, in order to get rid of Joel Anthony's luxury tax, a potential first-rounder of Philadelphia's was sent to Boston. Is this a change of course of the team where at one point you appeared to be cutting luxury tax? You're now willing, when you talk about room with all your free agents, of going in a different direction?
You're wrong on your assumption on Mike and on Joel.
Okay.
Those decisions were made because, one, we had extreme duplication at Mike's position. Joel Anthony had played 35 minutes in 30 games. The primary motivation for doing those things was to be in a better position this year because they all had contracts. They were under contract. And they would be under contract this year, and that would be, and so we cleared basically those contracts, not to save money. The residual reward was there was some tax money saved, but the thinking, the strategy behind it was this year we would not have those guys under contract with options.
Well, with Joel, you gave up a first-round pick.
So what? We wanted flexibility this year.
And with Mike, you could have...
We didn't give up a first-round pick. We gave up what we knew was going to be 2 seconds, I think.
And with Mike, you could have done that this summer and had the same flexibility going forward for next season.
Right, we could have, yeah. We could have done that, but we decided to do it then, just to clean up, I think, as I said, a duplication. At that time, and look, I love Mike. We all love Mike. I'm not trying to, throw Mike under the bus here or anything. But he had, 3 years of injuries. We didn't know how that was going to work out. So we made the decision, based on the discussion of always looking forward a year also to what was, 2014 going to look like. And we wanted it to be a little cleaner than what it is now. I mean, theoretically, we would have one guy under contract, that'd be Norris Cole. And, free agency is a two-way street. It's not always the players who have the advantage, because the worst case scenario, we could have the most room than anybody in the NBA or in the history of the NBA if everybody decided to opt out and go somewhere else, I'm not planning on that. That'd be my worst nightmare. But I think you got to protect your downside. Ray is an absolute phenomenon. He's an example for all guys in their young 30s who think that they're close to the end, and he's playing at 39 years old the way he can play. We probably asked a little bit too much of him. I can remember, the great Reggie Miller, from 30-30. Remember that thing, 30-30, that I wouldn't do the interview on because it had to do with 1 quarter in his career? You're right, to bring that up. A great player that played till he was 38 or 39 years old and very productive, so... there's a lot of guys that that can play late in their careers, but it's Ray that has proven that longevity is because of reinventing yourself physically, and so I think he's a great example for some of our players that might be thinking that that it's hard. Until you change the way you think about things, those things you think about are never going to change. So you got to be very disciplined with your thinking.